Duri. I was, as usual, reclining in my chair. The electric fire was spreading a soft, warm glow on that silent autumn evening. Duri was stretched out at my feet. He had not eaten the whole day. He got up, sniffed at the food, and came back to lie down again. He had been like that since the day my son left home to go to college. 2 days ago, my wife and I drove down to the university to get our son settled in. It was some 300 miles from where we lived. Many parents like us, from different parts of the country, had done the same thing. It was a sort of ritual for parents to accompany their children on that first day when a family tie would be severed. We carried all our son's belongings to the room allotted to him. His eyes were clouded. He was going to be away from us for the first time, and he was trying to be brave. My wife, not so successful in keeping her tears under check, began to sob. Unsure of what to do, my son picked up Duri and caressed him over and over again. Duri was the dog we gave him as a present on his 10th birthday. He and Duri had been inseparable since then. We returned to a very silent house. Our minds refused to accept the separation, so we spoke to him over the phone many times a day. He kept asking about Duri, and we made him bark into the phone. On hearing my son's voice, Duri ran over to his room, sniffed his bed, books, and clothes, and came back to lie down at my feet. He lifted his tear-filled eyes, rubbed his face on my lap, and groaned pitifully. Duri had come to us as a 6-week-old pup. After we had lifted up his leg and confirmed that he was male, we settled on the task of selecting a name for him. After rejecting many names, I suggested the name Duryodhana. My son had the right of veto, and he looked at me intently for a long while before he said, "Ah, we could call him Duri, short for Duryodhana." The name stuck. I had a reason for giving him that name. The king Duryodhana and Arjuna from the great epic Mahabharata epitomized friendship, loyalty, and love. I thought it was an apt name for a dog. I cannot describe all the havoc Duri caused when he was a puppy. From the day he came into our house, our routine had to be changed, and all our activities centered around him. We competed with each other to give him a drink of milk, feed him, or bathe him. Our son took care of toilet training. We spread newspapers all over the house and took proper precautions before going to bed at night. On icy cold nights, my son would let Duri out and wait, shivering in the cold, for him to return. It was a touching gesture. Sometimes Duri had an accident on the carpet, and when we scolded him, he would shrivel with shame and hide in a corner whimpering. He was quite intelligent, but also very mischievous. Right from the beginning, we established some basic rules for Duri, and this included not feeding him at the dining table while we ate. We did not want to humiliate him by having him beg for food or watch us eat while he was hungry. He got 2 cups of milk in the morning, and then, in the late afternoon, a measured quantity of dog food. He did not greedily devour all the food at one go, but rather grazed throughout the day, running to his bowl for a quick snack, as and when he needed. Duri was a playful puppy. He often stole our socks and undergarments and buried them in the garden. One day we caught him in the act, and when we demanded, "Where?" he went into the garden and started digging furiously everywhere. Many of his excavations were unsuccessful. After that, we took great care to safeguard our belongings. Duri was an Australian shepherd, and I was told his forefathers had gone from Spain to Australia and then to America about 100 years ago. Once used for herding sheep in Australia, the breed could easily be recognized by their blue eyes, folded ears, and soft, bushy hair. Weighing in at 60 pounds and standing 2 feet tall, the Australian Shepherd is a loyal and devoted friend to man. The hair on Duri's back was dense and chocolate-colored, Only his face and lower legs were the color of teak. He had a small white patch below his neck, and kind eyes. When he looked at you, it was as if he was beseeching you to hug him. There were 2 circles around his eyes. They gave you the illusion of open eyes even when he was asleep. It was said that when these dogs were minding sheep, the sheep were on their best behavior even when the dogs slept, misled by their apparently open eyes. While shepherding, the dogs round up the sheep, biting and snapping at the legs of straying animals, guiding them into the fold. Our dog had not yet forgotten that particular trait. When a group of 4 or 5 of us walked with him, he would gently herd us, nibbling at our ankles and getting us to fall into a neat formation. We engaged a trainer, and he taught us a few command words. Commands such as "come" and "stay" were easy, but the word "heel" took a really heavy toll on both the dog and us. Holding the dog's leash in your left hand, you had to make him walk to your left. We only realized how hazardous this was after we started practicing. The dog had to be level with your heel as you walked. If you stopped, he too had to stop, and when you walked, he had to walk. He wasn't allowed to go ahead of or lag behind you. I naturally tried to regulate my speed of walking to suit the dog's pace. This displeased the trainer. "The dog has to adjust to you, not the other way around," he warned me. When guests visited us, Dury hurried up to them, sniffed them, and then plodded off. The message of the visitor sent was now registered in his mind, so he could remember for the rest of his life that this person was his master's friend. When we went to the supermarket, he waited outside for us. He did not budge, even when he was teased or tempted. Once, however, he was put to the test. Standing guard outside a shop, he had become absolutely besotted by a shaggy bitch with matted locks. I don't think Dury ever before experienced such emotions. He fell for this enchanting damsel, and followed her. We found Dury after a long search, and he looked at us as if we were strangers. Moaning pitifully, he returned half-heartedly to us. That shaggy bitch had corrupted Dury's mind. I took him to a veterinarian and got him neutered. Even after the operation, he followed us faithfully, completely unaware of our treachery. One day I left Dury in the car and hurried into a department store. I had expected to be back in a few minutes, but once inside I talked to a friend I had not seen for quite some time, and I lost all track of time. It was the summer. By the time I rushed back to the car, there were a number of people, including a policeman, standing around the car. I knew what a terrible deed it was to leave a helpless animal inside a baking oven of a car. Short of falling at the policeman's feet, I apologized profusely for my lapse in judgment. But how could I ask for Dury's forgiveness? Dury, however, lifted up his head, looked at me with wet eyes, and brushed against my lap, as if I had done him a great favor. It was around this time that Dury learnt a lesson he was never to forget in all his life. There was a grove behind our house, populated by full-grown oak trees with wide-spreading branches. Multicolored woodpeckers had drilled holes straight into the trees that stood like upturned nodoswarums, and numerous squirrels safe-deposited acorns for the approaching winter. It was a beautiful sight. Honeybirds, woodpeckers, crested sparrows, and hummingbirds had made permanent homes there. The twitter of birds woke us all up quite early in the morning. We had fixed a small flap door in the house for Dury's use. This way he could come and go as he pleased. He would often take a majestic stroll before his subjects, squirrels, honeybirds, and woodpeckers, and show his authority. The birds chirped and moved out of his way, as if to show deference to him. With an extra measure of swagger in his step, Dury would walk through his empire and regally sprinkle his urine in different corners of the yard to claim his territory. It happened at about 11 at night. My wife and I were watching TV, and Dury was lying at our feet, cozy and warm. Suddenly, there was a strange smell, and before we could realize what was happening, Dury dashed out of the dog door. We saw a skunk with white stripes and bushy tail for one fleeting moment. It was an unforgettable sight. Desperate to escape, the skunk turned around, stood sideways, and squirted liquid from its underside. It was aimed straight at Dury's eyes, and he fell on the grass, howling as he never had before. The stench was so powerful we could not get near him. Eventually, we brought Dury in and bathed him in tomato juice, even as he continued to howl, and tried in vain to relieve him of his agony. His burns did not heal for 3 days, nor did the stench go away. We do not know what the skunk made of the whole affair, but there were no smelly attacks on Dury's empire after that. Dury had other run-ins with the locals. One summer we started hearing noises in the backyard at nights, and often found evidence of raccoon activity the following morning. Almost daily we found our garbage bins turned over on the ground and Dury's outdoor water bowl dirty and muddy. One day I saw the raccoon in action. It brought out the leftover fruits it had found in the garbage, washed them in Dury's water bowl, and ate them. The raccoon was about the height of a small dog, a mix of black and white in color, with white and yellow rings around its tail and eyes. The dark circles above its eyes made its face look like a beautiful mask. Dury, a fiercely independent king, did not like the raccoon's invasion into his empire. From that day on, he was on high alert. The raccoon arrived clandestinely at nights, upset the garbage bin, and searched for food, eating what he found after washing it in water. Dury would chase him spiritedly every night. This became a regular and predictable routine. The noise of the assaulted garbage bin continued, loud and long, in the middle of the night. Our ears gradually got used to the noise Dury made when he ran out through the dog door, and the thud-thud sounds the door made when it banged shut. The duel went on every night, without a break, like the mythical bout between King Duryodhana and Bhima of the great epic. The battle was abandoned during the day, and resumed at night with double ferocity. I wondered if Dury and the raccoon lived only for these nights. Dury slept intermittently during the day hours, and prepared himself for the dark. There was a continuous flow of buses on our road. Still, Dury was always able to identify clearly the sound our son's school bus made. He ran to the end of the road and escorted him home. Dury was always by his side. When my son studied, Dury lay down under his feet, licking him now and again for encouragement. In the mornings, Dury woke my son up and ran to get the paper from the doorstep. It was during that pleasant phase in our lives, when Dury had taken over our entire house and established himself as a friend, servant, and playmate, that our son had to leave us all and go to college. Dury changed into a new dog from that day. My wife and I tried our best to help him miss our son less. In the early days, my son visited us once a fortnight, and afterwards it became a monthly visit. Later on, he came only at the end of each semester. Dury accepted the new routine and adjusted his life to the change. When my son finished college and started working, his workplace was even farther away. It took half a day for him to travel to see us. Sometimes, when he spoke to us over the phone, he asked about Dury, and all Dury's activities were promptly reported. Just as the sun sets in the evening without waiting for anybody's command, Dury's activities of youth began to wane. His old virility had gone, and some changes became evident. He could not jet out of sleep, as he used to earlier. He had to keep straightening and folding his legs, taking time to get out of his lethargy. Yet he continued to be particular about following through on his duties. He was very careful not to let any bird or animal encroach into his territory. After chasing a squirrel or a sparrow, he would proudly perform his victory march, leaving a urine trail in the different corners of his kingdom before he returned to lie down. The raccoon became emboldened over the years and made frequent forays with renewed vigor. Dury would chase the animal with uncontrollable anger before coming back to lie down. The raccoon would sneak back almost instantly to tease him further. The raccoon was adept at climbing trees, and Dury barked and growled himself hoarse, returning only after he had established his right over his territory. One day, after waiting patiently for the right moment, the raccoon played a trick. It was 5 a.m, and as usual we heard the rolling of the garbage bin. Dury ran out, and as the door opened and shut with a thud, the raccoon scampered around as usual, pretending to escape, but instead of climbing a tree, he ran out through a hole he had made in the fence. With his senses blunted by the frenzy of warfare, Dury ran after the enemy onto the road and was struck by a car. As I lifted his limp body into my arms, I could tell he was breathing faintly. His misty eyes stared back at me, and the last breath of my longtime friend slipped slowly out, right there in my arms. Just as King Duryodhana was unjustly killed by a blow on his thigh, Dury, too, died on my lap, his thigh crushed to a pulp. I broke the news to my son, and he promptly came home that very evening. We dug a pit in our backyard, covered Dury in an old blanket, and buried him. Wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, my son planted an oak sapling to mark the burial site. Last night we heard the noise of the garbage bin being rolled over, followed by the sound of something being rinsed. Routine required the pattering of feet and the sound of the dog door opening and shutting. But that sound never came. End of Auspicious Times by Appadurai Muttalingam, Appadurai Muttulingham. Read by Dan Wallace in the Clive W. Lacey Recording Studio of the Braille and Talking Book Library, Perkins School for the Blind, May 2009. Monitored by Robert Pearson. Reviewed by Larry Cannon and Glenn Fukushima. Published by New Horizon Media Private Limited, Chennai, India. Further reproduction or distribution in other than a specialized format is prohibited. If you found the cassette in this book to be defective, please place a piece of string or rubber band around it and place it in the front of the container.